Monday evening, just after 6:15, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. I wasn't expecting anyone, and to my surprise, it was my cousin Dylan standing on the porch. My routine of working late into the night meant I was rarely home before midnight, so it was unusual to have visitors this early in the evening. I figured Dylan must have forgotten my schedule. "Dylan, hey." I greeted him, stepping aside to let him in. I handed him a beer from the fridge, and we settled on the couch to watch Monday Night Football. We kept the conversation light, work, sports, the usual, but something about him seemed off. He kept glancing toward the stairs or the hallway, as if expecting someone else to appear. I realized with mild annoyance that he was probably hoping to see my wife, Emily. She'd called me earlier to say she was out for drinks with her coworkers after work, so I had no reason to expect her home anytime soon. The evening dragged on. Dylan's uneasiness and distracted demeanor began to irritate me, but I pushed the thought aside. Truth be told, I had my own frustrations to deal with. Intimacy between Emily and me had become almost non-existent in recent months. She always had an excuse: exhaustion, stress from work, or just plain disinterest. It had been over 3 weeks since we'd been together, and the strain was starting to show. Dylan left around 8, muttering something about an early morning at work. I stayed behind, flipping through channels and nursing another beer. At some point, I must have dozed off, a rare occurrence for me. When I woke, it was past midnight, and Emily's car was parked outside. Oddly, she hadn't woken me or even said a word when she came in. That struck me as strange. When we did finally manage to reconnect physically, something felt different. She was distant, hesitant, and it felt like she was going through the motions. The excuses kept coming, and the distance between us grew. It gnawed at me, making me question my worth as a husband. I started to wonder if it was me, if I was doing something wrong, but the doubts were only half-formed. One night, weeks later, Emily broke her silence with a question that caught me completely off guard. "Do you think I feel different? Too loose?" Her tone was tentative, but the words hit me like a gut punch. What was she even asking? "No, of course not," I replied quickly, masking my confusion. "You're perfect." But the unease stayed with me. Her question felt like it came from a place of guilt or worry, not insecurity. It planted a seed of doubt in my mind, one I couldn't shake. Then, there was the night everything unraveled. I reached out to her for a moment of intimacy, only to hear her mumble groggily, "Oh, it's you." Her tone wasn't just dismissive, it was disappointed, as though she had been expecting someone else. "Who the hell did you think it was?" I snapped, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. My voice was sharp, cold, accusing. "Emily, who's been in our bed?" She flinched, but I was too furious to care. The air felt suffocating, and I needed space to think. Grabbing my shorts, I stormed downstairs, my heart pounding. I sat on the patio, staring up at the stars, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The memory of her tone replayed over and over in my head, stoking my suspicions. Was she really out with friends all those nights, or was there something she wasn't telling me? The thought was unbearable. Feeling restless, I turned on the TV in an attempt to distract myself. That's when I noticed an unlabeled tape sitting on the shelf near the VCR. Curious, I popped it in, expecting to see some old home video or a recording of a show. What appeared on the screen made my blood run cold. The footage was grainy but unmistakable. It was Emily and Dylan. They were in our bedroom. The camera angle suggested it had been hidden in the closet, capturing every detail in excruciating clarity. I sat frozen, unable to look away, my mind racing with questions. How long had this been going on? Who had set up the camera? Before I could process the betrayal fully, I heard Emily's frantic voice upstairs. "What did I do to deserve this?" she shouted, her voice panicked. I heard her dialing a number, likely Dylan's, and rage surged through me. I stormed upstairs and yanked the phone from her hand. "Calling Dylan, are you?" I said, my tone icy. "Tell him to stay far away from me, or better yet, tell him I'll see him at the next family gathering. It'll be a day he won't forget." I slammed the phone down and turned to her trembling figure. "Thanks to you and that idiot cousin of mine, I don't need a private investigator. You handed me the evidence on a silver platter." She stared at me, her face pale and tear-streaked. "What are you going to do?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "What do you think?" "I'm divorcing you," I replied coldly. Her pleas for forgiveness fell on deaf ears. "Why would I stay, Emily? You've made it clear you don't care about me or our marriage," I said, my voice rising. I ordered her to leave, and as she finally walked out the door, I felt a strange mixture of fury and relief. With her gone, I wasted no time. I secured my finances, transferring most of the money from our joint account into my personal one. I cancelled our shared credit cards and took steps to protect myself from any fallout. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept soundly. The next morning, I went even further. I rented a safe deposit box in my name only and moved all valuables there. At work, I instructed my secretary to screen my calls, bracing myself for the inevitable drama. When my boss, Richard, asked me to handle a client issue in Denver, I declined, explaining that I had personal matters to deal with. This wasn't the life I'd envisioned, but I wasn't going to let their betrayal define my future. I was still grappling with the fallout when Thomas, my boss, stepped in to help. Thankfully, he recommended his lawyer, Mark Reynolds, a man he trusted implicitly. It was clear the fight wasn't over, but I felt ready for whatever came next. Thomas even arranged for me to contact Reynolds on my way to the airport, as Diana, his assistant, had already booked my flight. Though reluctant to leave town with so much chaos unfolding, I knew the assignment was important. I hurried home, packed, secured the house, and set off. On the way, I called Reynolds. He immediately laid out a plan, offering advice and reassurance. To strengthen my case, I fabricated a story about Dylan threatening Emily, claiming it justified a restraining order. "If he tries anything, I'll handle it," I added, even hinting that Emily had joked about enjoying the drama. It wasn't entirely truthful, but after her betrayals, I felt it was a necessary step to protect myself. Navigating airport security and check-in was its usual hassle, but I made it through. As I waited for my flight, Reynolds' reassurances played over in my mind, especially his promise that the restraining order would be granted. The only catch was a hearing in 10 days to finalize it. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was resorting to lies to protect myself from someone who had deceived me so easily. The trip to Atlanta went smoothly. The contract issue was resolved quickly, earning Thomas's praise. "You did good work," he said. He also informed me that his son-in-law had rekeyed my house, ensuring Emily couldn't enter. That gave me peace of mind as I wrapped up my tasks, including visits to 2 other clients. By the time I boarded my return flight, I felt a small sense of accomplishment, though it was quickly overshadowed by the personal mess waiting for me. When I landed close to midnight, my phone was flooded with missed calls and voicemails from Emily. Deleting her messages without a second thought, I listened to Reynolds' update instead. He confirmed the protective order had been granted and would be served to Emily at her workplace the next morning. It was a relief to know things were progressing. Arriving home, I was greeted by a sheriff's deputy who asked for my ID. After confirming my identity, he handed me a set of keys and explained that Emily had tried to enter the house twice, causing a scene each time. Smirking, I thanked him, feeling a small but satisfying sense of victory. Inside, the answering machine blinked furiously, but I ignored it. Too tired to care, I turned off my phone and went straight to bed. The next morning, curiosity got the better of me. I played the messages, all from Emily, pleading for me to call her. "Too late, honey," I muttered to myself. At work, my secretary, Anna, mentioned that Emily had been calling the office too. "Don't worry, I didn't let her through," she assured me. "Thanks for that," I replied. "You say that to all the girls," she teased, her light-heartedness a welcome distraction. Later, I updated Thomas on the situation and thanked him again for connecting me with Reynolds. "What's the plan now?" he asked. I shrugged. "Move on, I guess. Maybe find someone who actually appreciates me." Thomas nodded, offering words of encouragement. Back in my office, I called Reynolds, who confirmed that the divorce papers were being filed and would be served before lunch. Around noon, Anna invited me out for lunch, sensing I needed the break. At Tria's, a small bistro we frequented, she handed me a folded piece of paper with a sly smile. "What's this?" I asked. "A list of women interested in you, now that you're single," she joked. I scanned the names, raising an eyebrow. "Emily Carter. Isn't she engaged?" "Not anymore," Anna laughed. "She caught her fiancé cheating. Trust me, she's into you." The list had 7 names, and a few caught my attention. "So, you're saying they're all interested?" I asked, smirking. Anna nodded. "Absolutely. I've overheard them talking about you." I noticed something and couldn't resist pointing it out. "Your name's not on here." She hesitated. "I thought about it. But you're just starting a divorce, and I'm married. Not the right circumstances." "Fair enough," I replied, smiling. "But if you were single, you'd be perfect for me right now." She laughed. "Sure, because I'm so far from perfect." "That's where you're wrong," I said. "You've got something they don't." "Oh yeah? What's that?" she asked. "You're married," I teased. Her expression shifted to puzzled amusement. I clarified, "Right now, I don't need an emotional connection. It'd be too easy to get involved with someone on this list. But you've got your own scores to settle. If we got involved, it'd be strictly physical." "Are you serious?" she asked, surprised. "Completely," I replied. "But don't get me wrong, if you were free, it'd be different." She smiled. "How about a long lunch tomorrow?" I nodded. "It's a date." Later that afternoon, Emily called. I figured she'd been served by now and decided to answer. "What do you want?" I asked bluntly. "Why can't I get into the house? What's with the divorce? And the credit cards, why aren't they working? And the restraining order? What the hell, David?" she demanded, her voice rising. "It's simple," I replied coldly. "The cards don't work because divorcing a cheating wife means cutting her off. You can't get into the house because you don't live here anymore. And the restraining order? That's to keep you out." "This is ridiculous," she protested. "You're going to throw away half your assets over a fling?" "It meant nothing." "That's where you're wrong," I said firmly. It meant everything. "And now you'll deal with the consequences." "I love only you," Emily pleaded over the phone, her words hollow, just like her promises had been for years. "I see it differently," I replied coldly. "You cheated. That makes you a strumpet in my eyes, which is why I filed for divorce." "We should discuss this face to face," she insisted. To my surprise, I agreed. "Where and when?" she asked eagerly. "Not tonight," I answered sharply. "I've barred you from the house." "You can't keep me out," she protested. "Actually, I can. The house is mine, not yours," I said firmly. "You'll retrieve your belongings with a court official present to ensure fairness." "Let's just talk it out," she urged. "Not here," I repeated. "You're being unreasonable," she snapped. "Where then?" she demanded. "Tomorrow at 6 p.m., Madeline's Bistro. We'll have privacy there," I proposed, ending the call without waiting for her reply. As I hung up, I couldn't help but wonder if Emily truly believed her excuses could sway me. Sadly, I knew the answer. Why wouldn't she think I was naive? I'd let her off the hook for years, always choosing to believe the best in her despite the flags waving in my face. That evening, I stopped by Skyline Bar after work, hoping for a change of scenery and maybe some laughs to take the edge off. It was open mic night, and as I sat at the bar, Sophia greeted me. "The usual, David?" she asked with a warm smile. "You know it. A PBR and some good company," I replied. "I've got just the thing for you," Sophia said, sliding the beer across the counter. On stage, a woman began a stand-up routine. Her jokes were sharp, and her delivery was flawless. A surveyor stopped by Will's farm in eastern Minnesota and said, "Bad news, your farm is actually in Wisconsin." Will sighed with relief and said, "Thank God. I was just telling my wife this morning I couldn't handle another Minnesota winter." The audience laughed, including me. She continued with more jokes, her quick wit lifting my spirits. 2 more comedians followed, and by the time I left, I felt noticeably lighter. Maybe there's some truth to the saying that laughter really is the best medicine. The next day, I dove into work, but Sophia reminded me of our lunch plans. Despite a hectic morning, we headed out at 11:30. On the way, I teased her, "You sure you want lunch before the rest of our plans? Food slows me down." "But I'll manage," she quipped. At the Marriott, I checked us in under the alias Meister and Mrs. Dylan Tomlinson, a subtle jab at Emily's donkey-like loyalty to Dylan. Once in the room, Sophia and I wasted no time, and for a few stolen hours, I felt alive again. The remainder of the day flew by, and soon it was time to meet Emily at Madeline's. I arrived early, choosing a secluded booth away from the dance floor. Ordering my usual beer, I settled in to wait. Emily arrived 5 minutes later, looking stunning as always. Normally, seeing her like that would stir something in me, but the memory of her betrayal dulled any desire. She slid into the booth, irritated when I requested separate checks. I sipped my beer and prompted, "All right, Emily. You called this meeting. What's on your mind?" "Honestly, David, you could have been more courteous given the circumstances," she said with a huff. "Emily, you're lucky I haven't torn you apart." "Speak up, or I'll walk out," I snapped. With a sigh, she began her pitch. "You're blowing things out of proportion. We don't need to divorce. Worse, I love you, David. Always have, always will. My affair with Dylan means nothing to me. Yes, it happened, but it was just physical. Most of the time, I can't stand him. He's never been a threat to you or our marriage." I leaned forward, my voice low and biting. "If he means nothing, then why prioritize him over me?" "I didn't," she countered weakly. "Yes, you did. Think about the last 6 months. How often have you chosen him over me? And the last 3 weeks, you've been avoiding me night after night with one excuse after another. You call that love?" "It wasn't that bad," she muttered. "It was," I shot back. "Every night, I stayed out of your way, thinking you were tired or stressed, while you were enjoying yourself elsewhere. And when I finally tried to initiate something, you were into it, until you realized it was me. Remember that?" "Oh, it's you. I'm tired. Leave me alone." That, Emily, said it all. Her face flushed with guilt, but she stammered, "David, those things I told Dylan, I only said them because he likes hearing them. He's pathetic and needs his ego stroked. There's nothing wrong with you in bed. You've always satisfied me. Then why seek him out at all?" "It's not like that," she protested. "It's not other men, David. It's only Dylan. Do you hear yourself? You think that makes it better? Cheating is cheating, whether it's 1 man or 10. Before you saw that tape, would you say our marriage was good?" she asked quietly. "Maybe okay. Definitely not great," I admitted. So tell me, David, did you sleep with Dylan before we got married? She hesitated, then nodded. Then why marry me at all? I demanded. Because I love you, David. I always have. I don't even like Dylan that much. Then why keep going back to him? I asked, my frustration boiling over. Because he gives me something you can't, she whispered. Her words hit like a sledgehammer, and for the first time, I felt utterly done. I stared at Emily, trying to process how she could say such a thing and expect me to stay. Whatever Emily thought we had left was gone. There was no fixing this. Look at it this way, David, Emily said, her voice dripping with desperation. Think of Dylan as just assisting you with me. I stared at her, incredulous. You're insane if you think I'll buy that, I replied coldly. If that's all you have to say, this conversation is over. I began to rise from the table, but she quickly interjected, you'll never persuade anyone that infidelity is acceptable. You're right about that, I said. But don't forget, I have the tape you and Dylan so generously made for me. Are you sure about that? She asked, her confidence wavering. Absolutely, I affirmed, smirking as I walked away. As I reached the door, a grin crept onto my face. She still didn't realize the tape she'd taken was blank. Just as I grabbed the car door handle, I heard the familiar click of her heels. Turning, I saw Emily half running toward me, somehow maintaining impressive speed in her high heels. David, I need to get into the house, she pleaded. I need my clothes and belongings. Though her urgency might have softened another man, I felt no such obligation. Have your lawyer contact mine to arrange it, I said, sliding into the car. Rolling down the window, I added, goodbye, Emily, and drove off as she called after me. Wait, David. Just a minute. Truthfully, I could have let her follow me home to grab her things without much trouble, it wouldn't have inconvenienced me. But at that moment, I thought, forget her. If she didn't already have a lawyer, it would take her at least a day or two to find one. Since it was Thursday, I figured the earliest she'd manage would be Monday. Even then, she'd need more time to organize her return. By then, I planned to have all her belongings packed into garbage bags with little care, just to make a point. If I was lucky, she'd have to run everything through the dry cleaner or laundromat before using it. Was I resentful? Not really. But I wasn't about to make things easy for her, either. That night, I slept soundly. On Friday, I enjoyed a long lunch with Sophia again. As we wrapped up a particularly busy work week, she asked about my weekend plans. Nothing concrete, I admitted. Well, she said with a smile, would you like to spend the weekend with me? I'd love to, but how are you going to pull it off with your husband around? I asked. He's going fishing this weekend. He packed up this morning and is leaving straight from work, she explained. I'm free until noon on Sunday, if you're interested. Silly girl, I teased. Let's see, dinner and dancing tonight, then we play at home Saturday morning, more playtime followed by dinner and dancing that evening, Sunday morning play until noon, then brunch. How does that sound? Sounds great, she replied with a grin. But how about we skip the dancing and focus on playing? That won't do, I said with mock seriousness. Your energy might flag, but mine won't. We'll stick to the plan. All right, your plan it is, she agreed. Back at the office, I told her I'd pick her up at 7 o'clock and suggested she pack for the weekend. When I got home, I found Emily hadn't wasted time. Entering the bedroom to change, I noticed her dressing room was partially empty. Most of her belongings were gone. Investigating further, I found a broken window in the family room facing the patio. Though I couldn't prove Emily was responsible, the sight of blood on the glass shards gave me a grim sense of satisfaction. Looks like she hurt herself climbing in, I thought. I called a glass company, scheduled a repair for the next day, and decided to leave the mess as it was. Afterward, I showered, dressed, and headed out to meet Sophia. We dined, danced, and indulged in a few drinks. Though we retired early, sleep eluded us until nearly 3 a.m. When I finally set my watch for 9 o'clock, I anticipated the glazier's arrival between 10 o'clock and 12 o'clock. But Sophia had other plans, waking me at 7:20 in a far more pleasant manner. Afterward, I tidied up the broken glass just as the glazier arrived at 10:10. By 10:40, the repairs were complete, and by 11 o'clock, Sophia and I were enjoying a leisurely breakfast at Riverside Cafe. Over the meal, I asked what she'd like to do with the rest of the day. "Just relax and cuddle," she said simply. "That's all I want." And that's exactly what we did. By late afternoon, feeling content, we ordered pizza for dinner and spent the evening lounging on the couch watching TV. Our cozy plans were interrupted briefly, but neither of us minded much. Sunday morning came too soon, bringing the sobering realization that I'd have to return Sophia to her husband. Over pancakes at Lakeside Diner, I broached the topic. "How much time do we have left?" I asked. "What do you mean?" she replied, puzzled. "When are you planning to leave me?" I clarified. "Why do you think I'll leave you?" she asked, her expression softening. "From what you've said about flirting with Ethan," I explained, "I got the impression this was more casual than serious." "Maybe, but that wasn't my intention," she said. "Usually, the men I meet become possessive, wanting me to leave Ethan for them, and me." I raised an eyebrow at Sophia's confession. She smiled thoughtfully. "You're different." "None of them could match Ethan's lifestyle," Sophia admitted as we sat together. "I couldn't imagine trading a comfortable home in a nice neighborhood for a one-bedroom apartment, worrying about bills every month. Plus, they weren't any better in bed than Ethan, and they were messy." Her honesty left me dumbfounded. "And yet you wore your wedding rings the entire time?" I asked, struggling to see the logic. "Yes," she admitted without hesitation. "I wasn't looking to replace Ethan. I just wanted retribution." "Retribution?" I echoed, incredulous. She nodded. "If any of them had gotten too attached, knowing I was married, how could I trust them in a long-term relationship? They'd already proven themselves untrustworthy. So what does that make me? Just another fling?" I asked, leaning back in my chair. "Don't be ridiculous," she said, her voice softening. "You're different. I've worked with you for over 5 years, and in all that time, you've never flirted with me, not once. I made the first move. You didn't pursue me, I offered. And you had the sense not to refuse. And if this ends?" I asked. "If it ends, it'll be on my terms," she assured me. "But don't worry, it won't be any time soon." Smiling, I leaned toward her. "Do we have time for one more before I take you home?" Her grin was all the answer I needed. As we left together that Sunday night, I went to bed feeling like one of the happiest men in the state, maybe even the neighborhood. But on my Monday morning commute, reality hit me. As much as I enjoyed being with Sophia, I knew it couldn't continue, not in the same way. I was suing Emily for infidelity, and if she hired a competent lawyer, they'd undoubtedly dig into my life to find leverage. If they discovered my relationship with Sophia, Emily could counterclaim. Still, I wasn't ready to give Sophia up. After years of deprivation with Emily, I wasn't about to endure more loneliness during the divorce proceedings. At work, I called Sophia into my office and explained the situation. "We need to be careful," I said. "If Emily's lawyer catches wind of us, it could jeopardize everything." Sophia thought for a moment. "I have a couple of ideas. Let me know what you think." "Go on," I encouraged. "First, replace these uncomfortable chairs with a couch. It'll be more inviting for visitors, and convenient for us," she said with a smirk. "That's doable," I agreed. "Then we adjust our schedule. You often stay late, so I'll need to stay late too." After the couch is installed, you leave first. I'll wait 10 or 15 minutes before leaving, just in case anyone's watching. That sounds workable, I said. What's the other option? For our lunch dates, book a hotel room in advance. Call me with the room number, and I'll use the stairs to avoid being seen. But we can't do this too often, too many conferences might raise suspicion. I nodded thoughtfully. It's a start. That afternoon, I ordered the couch myself, bypassing approval from accounting to avoid delays. At 5 o'clock, I called Sophia back into my office. Tell Ethan you'll be working late Thursday, I instructed. The couch will be delivered at noon. How did you get this arranged so quickly? She asked, impressed. I handled it myself. No need to involve anyone else, I replied. Before leaving, Sophia kissed me, the open door be damned. I was hoping we wouldn't have to wait until Thursday, she teased. Don't forget about tomorrow's conference with Ajax, I reminded her. Oh, shoot. I completely forgot, she said with a laugh. When I arrived home, my good mood soured instantly. Emily's car was parked in the middle of the driveway, blocking access to the garage. I parked on the street and walked toward her car. She approached me, arms crossed. We need to talk, David. Things are escalating. Ignoring her, I opened her car door, reached into her purse, and dumped its contents onto the seat. After counting her cash, I pocketed it and tossed the purse back. You still owe me $14 for the broken window, I said coldly. We have nothing more to discuss. David, I love you. I don't want a divorce, she pleaded. We can work through this. It doesn't have to end. I looked at her, unmoved. No, Emily. There's no coming back from this, especially after I found out you betrayed me before we even got married. It's over. Her shoulders slumped, and for a moment, I thought she might cry. Instead, she straightened and said, I hoped you'd see reason, but I knew you wouldn't. If you're set on divorce, I'll fight you. Don't expect me to settle for a 70-30 split. I'm sorry you won't hold yourself accountable, I replied evenly. But infidelity is a fact, Emily. You'll have to prove otherwise, and you can't. Her face hardened. We'll see about that, she said before storming off. As I watched her drive away, I felt a strange mixture of relief and resolve. Whatever fight Emily had in her, I was ready to face it head-on. It'll be your word against mine, David, Emily sneered. I'll deny everything. I'll say you're trying to swindle me out of my fair share of the property. You might even face consequences for it. I smiled coldly. You seem to forget, I have visual evidence of your infidelity. With my cousin, no less. No, David, she replied with a smug look. I haven't forgotten. I grabbed that tape when I left the house, and destroyed it. Now it's your word against mine, and without proof, you'll lose, Emily said smugly. You destroyed it? I asked, fighting surprise. Dylan will never forgive you. He needed that tape. He might even lose interest in you for ruining it. Don't you get it? I don't care about Dylan, she snapped. Yes, I wanted what he offered, but I don't need it. I need you. I shrugged, completely unmoved. You still owe me $14 for the window, I said flatly, then turned and walked into the house, leaving her fuming on the doorstep. For the next 10 minutes, she pounded on the door and rang the bell relentlessly. Finally, she gave up and stalked down the driveway. Watching her retreat, I smirked. She clearly hadn't bothered to check the tape's contents, it was blank, a surprise I'd saved for later. I wanted her to lawyer up, rack up debt, and waste thousands fighting a losing battle. By the time she realized I still had the real tape, it would all be for nothing. That night, I slept like a baby. Tuesday passed uneventfully. A smooth conference call with Ajax left me in high spirits. Wednesday was even better, especially when Sophia suggested a quick meeting at my desk after everyone else had left. It didn't take much convincing. As we wrapped up, I reminded her about her late shift on Thursday. On the way home, I decided to stop by Skyline Bar. It turned out to be open mic night, and the place was packed. After some effort, I snagged a seat at the bar. The comedy was hit or miss, but I stayed for a bit, sipping my beer as a mechanic-turned-comedian shared a story about building a lie-detecting robot. It was good for a few laughs, but once the show lulled, I headed home. Thursday brought 2 bits of good news. First, my lawyer informed me that Emily's attorney had officially announced her intent to contest the divorce. I couldn't help but grin. She was taking the bait. Second, the black leather couch I'd ordered arrived right on time. I'd chosen leather for a reason, anticipating the stains Sophia and I might leave on it. That afternoon, the couch saw its first use. The weeks blurred together in a mix of work, legal maneuvering, and stolen moments with Sophia. Most of our encounters took place on the couch, though we occasionally opted for the conference room when we wanted a change. Meanwhile, Emily called me almost daily, insisting she still loved me and urging me to move forward together. I could have changed my number to block her, but I found a twisted satisfaction in reminding her she was wasting her time. Reynolds stayed busy negotiating with Emily's attorney. They proposed changing the grounds for divorce from infidelity to irreconcilable differences, with a 50-50th property split. I refused, instructing Reynolds to counter with a 65-35 division instead. I wanted her to squirm, knowing she'd never accept that deal. Reynolds reminded me that before presenting the tape to the judge, he was obligated to notify Emily's lawyer. I left it to his discretion. That's what I was paying him for, after all. Around this time, I began noticing a stranger lingering nearby on multiple occasions. It felt like someone was tailing me. Paranoia? Maybe. But I wouldn't put it past Emily to hire someone. Another week passed before Reynolds called with news. Emily and her attorney wanted a meeting. We scheduled it for Friday at 10 a.m. I arrived half an hour early to review the details with Reynolds. We decided to bring the tape to the meeting but not reveal it unless necessary. I couldn't resist one last chance to toy with Emily. The meeting began predictably, with Emily denying everything. "You're being completely unreasonable," she argued. "There's no proof of infidelity, and I won't agree to a one-sided settlement." I leaned back, calm and confident. "Emily, we both know the truth. The tape you and Dylan made speaks for itself." Her eyes narrowed, and she replied smoothly, "No, it doesn't. You have no evidence." I smiled. "Tell you what, I'll offer you a deal. Sign the papers now, and I'll settle for a 60-40th split. You have 2 minutes to decide. If you refuse, I'll let the judge decide." Emily crossed her arms, glaring. "I won't agree, David. You have nothing on me." "Sure, Emily," I said, my voice steady. "I have the tape of you and Dylan." Her composure cracked, and she snapped, "Damn it, David, I already told you, I destroyed the damn tape." The room fell silent as her words hung in the air. Reynolds and I exchanged a knowing glance. Emily realized her mistake too late. I had her exactly where I wanted her. "Oh, so you admit to infidelity and destroying evidence?" I asked, watching the realization dawn on Emily's face. Her eyes widened as she stammered, "No, that's not what I meant." I leaned back, unimpressed. "Never mind, Emily. I offered leniency, but your stubbornness, as always, led you to reject it. Let the courts decide." Before Emily could respond, her lawyer interjected. "If you indeed possess evidence, you'd better reveal it now." I gestured to Reynolds, who moved toward the TV/VCR setup at the end of the table. "This is your final chance, Emily," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I'm willing to settle for a 60-40th split, but once he presses play, the deal is off the table, and we proceed to court, I said. Emily crossed her arms defiantly. Screw you, David. You've got nothing on me. Reynolds pressed play. As the video began to play, I rose from my chair and said coolly, "See you in court, Emily." I walked out, not waiting for her reaction. Before I even reached the parking lot, my phone rang. It was Mark. "They're interested in making a deal," he said. "No thanks," I replied. I offered her an out, and she refused. Full steam ahead. Over the next few days, Emily's phone calls escalated. I disconnected the house phone and made sure Sophia knew not to pass on any messages. That left my cell phone as Emily's only option, and I kept the number deliberately. Her countless unanswered calls provided no small amount of amusement. Meanwhile, Sophia continued to provide excitement in my life, enough to keep Emily's antics in perspective. 3 days after the meeting with Emily and the lawyers, Sophia approached me with a serious look on her face. "We've got a problem." "A major one," she said. My stomach sank. "How serious?" "Pretty serious," she replied. "Ethan has to fly back to Ohio for a week to deal with some issues involving his parents' inheritance." I blinked, confused. "So, what's the problem?" "How do we manage a whole week together?" she asked with a sly smile. Relieved, I laughed. "That's easy. You leave work half an hour before me, drive to my place, and park a block away. Make sure the curtains are shut tight, and when I get home, we'll have our time. In the mornings, I'll leave for work first to throw off any watchers. After a short wait, you head to work. We'll keep this up through the week." She nodded thoughtfully. "What about the weekend?" "We stick to the same routine, but Friday night when I get home, we stay in all weekend. Think you can handle 2.5 days with me?" "What I'm not sure about," she teased, "is whether you can survive 2.5 days with me." "We won't know until we try," I said with a grin. We went through with the plan, and it worked without a hitch. By the time the weekend ended, I realized how much I'd grown used to Sophia's company. She was fun, attentive, and easy to be around. But as she returned home to Ethan, I felt a pang of sadness. I knew that once my divorce was finalized, I'd be searching for someone to fill that void permanently. I wanted the comfort of marriage again, a loving partner to share my life with, someone to fall asleep with at night and wake up beside in the morning. While I could imagine that with Sophia, I doubted she'd leave Ethan. She seemed content with him despite his flaws. She enjoyed our time together but showed no signs of wanting to change her situation. Reflecting on the list that had sparked our affair, I mentally reviewed my options. Emily from accounting, one of the names on the list, was attractive and didn't smoke, a habit I despised after growing up in a household of heavy smokers. But Emily was much younger than me, and our age gap felt like a hurdle. A brief encounter in her office, where she was blasting rap music, a genre I couldn't stand, confirmed my doubts. While a fling might have been tempting, I couldn't see a lasting relationship with her. These thoughts preoccupied me during my Monday morning commute. Once at work, the day flew by. I was so swamped with tasks that when Sophia popped into my office asking about lunch, I had to decline. As I was wrapping up for the day, Reynolds called. "Emily is eager to resolve the matter," he began. "I know your stance on bargaining, but offering her a 60-40th split might be wise. Infidelity does influence asset division, but 2 of our 7 divorce judges tend to favor a 50-50 split regardless of the grounds." I mulled it over for a moment before replying, "Make it 65-35 and see if she bites." Later that day, Sophia appeared at my office door, missing her usual spark. "Can we spend some time on the couch?" "I missed my extended lunch," she said with a wink. I grinned. "Only because you asked nicely." The following morning, Reynolds called again. "Emily agreed to the 65-35 deal," he said. "She'll be in Wednesday at 5 to sign the papers." She also requested a brief meeting with you. Though I saw little purpose in meeting her, I agreed, mostly to expedite the process and minimize inconvenience to Sophia. I told Mark I'd be available at 2 to accommodate her request. We convened in the conference room, and I settled into my seat, waiting for Emily to say her piece. After a moment of silence, she took a deep breath. "I don't want this, David," she began. "I know you may not believe it, but I love you. Maybe we can find a way to reconcile." "Absolutely not, Emily," I replied, my voice firm. "Not after discovering the full extent of your infidelity. Let me be clear, if it were a fleeting affair, maybe I could have forgiven you. Suppose you had a few regrettable encounters before our marriage, followed by years of fidelity, and then a single slip-up, maybe, just maybe, I could have worked through that. But a long-standing affair that began before we even committed to each other? No chance. There's no fixing this." Her expression faltered, but she persisted. "Can't you give us a chance, David? Please." "I can't, Emily. I'll never trust you again, and I won't live my life like this," I said, rising from my chair. As I reached the door, I paused and turned back. "You're an attractive woman, Emily. You won't be single for long. But if you find someone new, I hope he treats you exactly the way you treated me." With that, I walked out, heading straight to Skyline Bar. Sophie greeted me at the counter. "Where have you been, handsome?" she teased, sliding a PBR my way. "Dealing with a divorce." "Haven't been feeling very social," I replied. "Well," she said with a grin, "does that mean I might finally get a chance to charm you?" I chuckled. "I thought you were happy with your boyfriend." "I was," she said, rolling her eyes. "Turns out he wasn't what I thought." Deciding I'd had enough for the night, I signaled for the bill. As Sophie handed me my change, she flashed a smile. "When your divorce is finalized, don't forget about me, okay?" "I won't," I said, leaving in surprisingly high spirits. Once Emily signed the papers, the legalities were mostly settled. Though I was still waiting for the court's final decision, I felt liberated, free from Emily's scrutiny in our constant battles. Sophia and I no longer needed to hide our meetings, which added a sense of ease to our time together. The following morning, Sophia strolled into my office. "What's the plan for lunch?" she asked. "We're back to the Marriott," I said with a grin. "I'll leave at 11:20 and book a room." "That won't be necessary anymore," she replied, a mischievous sparkle in her eye. "Emily signed the papers yesterday. We don't need to worry about something that might not have happened." At 11:30, we left for the Marriott. Once the door to room 43 shut behind us, we fell onto the bed, wasting no time. Afterward, while we dressed, Sophia turned to me. "What now?" "What do you mean?" I asked, slightly caught off guard. "I mean now that you're free," she clarified. I paused, formulating my response. "As long as you want me, I'll stick around. But eventually, I'll be looking for a wife. I liked being married." She raised an eyebrow. "What qualities are you looking for?" "Someone attractive who loves me, has the strength to tolerate me, and is a decent cook," I said. "I can cook," she offered with a playful smile. I caught the deeper meaning behind her words. "If you meet the criteria, I'll prioritize your application," I teased. "But there's a catch. I won't engage in bigamy." Her expression shifted for a moment before the realization hit. She beamed. "Don't worry, love. Ethan's days are numbered." A concern crossed my mind, and my expression must have shown it. Sophia noticed immediately. "What's wrong, kid? What's on your mind?" "We don't need to hide things from Emily anymore, but now we have to keep this from Ethan while you navigate your divorce," I said. She shrugged. "I doubt that's necessary. I'll give him a choice, infidelity or irreconcilable differences. I've got enough evidence of his affairs to back me up." If I threaten to expose him, he'll go for irreconcilable differences to protect his career. I raised an eyebrow. His career? Ethan wants a VP position, she explained. But the CEO and several board members are devout Christians. If word of his affairs gets out, his chances will vanish. I'll inconvenience myself with a week or two in a motel if it means wrapping this up cleanly. True to her word, Sophia moved quickly. She scheduled a meeting with Reynolds for Friday, requesting him to draft 2 sets of papers, one citing infidelity and the other irreconcilable differences. By Saturday morning, she withdrew half the funds from their checking account, all her savings, and 4 out of 6 CDs from their safe deposit box. Returning home, she packed Ethan's belongings, loaded them into her car, and checked into a motel. By mid-afternoon, she was back preparing dinner. As they sat down to eat, she uncorked a bottle of wine and laid everything out. Armed with PI reports documenting 3 of Ethan's affairs, she calmly stated that she had reached her breaking point and intended to divorce him. She detailed her financial actions and offered to relinquish her share of the house, which exceeded her bank loan. Presenting him with the papers, she explained his options and gave him until 10 a.m. Monday to decide. Then, with a satisfied smile, she left the dirty dishes for Ethan to handle. As expected, Ethan called her that evening. Fine, he said tersely. Irreconcilable differences. On Wednesday, Sophia and Ethan met in Reynolds's office, where Ethan signed the divorce papers without much fanfare. Sophia chose to stay at the motel over the weekend to allow the situation to settle before making any permanent moves. By Sunday afternoon, she checked out and moved in with me, bringing along only the essentials. We planned to live together until our divorces were finalized, at which point we'd marry. However, there was a significant complication. Sophia excelled at her job and wanted to continue working, but our company strictly prohibited relatives from working together. While technically we could both remain employed, one of us would need to relocate, and the nearest facility was 90 miles away, far too impractical. For either of us, that arrangement was impractical. After much discussion, Sophia and I decided to keep our marriage under wraps. She would retain her surname and health insurance, and we'd continue living as if nothing had changed, at least until the truth inevitably came out. If that happened, Sophia planned to resign and find another position, though with my salary, she didn't need to work unless she wanted to. By 3 p.m. that Sunday, Sophia was officially moved in, and the following months flew by without incident. For the first time in years, life felt calm. I began to relax, lowering my defenses, a mistake I'd soon regret. Emily, of course, couldn't leave things alone. She continued to call once or twice a week, usually just to complain or plead with me. I made the mistake of answering occasionally, only to shut her down. There was a twisted satisfaction in dismissing her, but I should have known better. Emily was persistent, and ignoring her only seemed to fuel her resolve. On a Wednesday evening, Sophia and I decided to stop by Skyline Bar. It wasn't a planned outing, we'd gone to support Jessica, one of the accounting girls, who was trying her hand at stand-up comedy during the lounge's open mic night. We sat at our usual spot, sipping drinks as Jessica took the stage. While her effort was commendable, Sophia and I agreed that comedy wasn't her calling. Her jokes fell flat, and most of the audience offered polite, awkward laughter. One of her bits involved a wife catching her husband with a piece of paper bearing the name Jenny. When confronted, the husband insisted Jenny was the name of a horse he'd bet on at the racetrack. The punchline involved the wife knocking him out when Jenny called him on the phone. It was light-hearted, but even Jessica seemed relieved when her set ended. The night took a sharp turn when, out of nowhere, Emily's voice rang out across the room. "Keep your damn hands off my man, you strumpet," she yelled, venom dripping from every word. Sophia and I turned simultaneously, just in time to see Emily pouring a drink over Sophia's head. Shocked but not one to back down, Sophia retaliated instantly, tossing her own drink in Emily's face. The room erupted in gasps as Emily stumbled, her heels slipping on the now wet floor. Without hesitation, I grabbed Sophia and pulled her out of the fray, guiding her toward the parking lot. "Let's go," I urged, handing her some rags from the trunk to dry off. Before we could leave, Emily emerged from the lounge, unsteady and bleeding slightly from her nose. To my disgust, Dylan appeared beside her, attempting to steady her. The sight of him ignited a rage I hadn't felt in years. "You rotten son of a cow!" I shouted, dropping the rags and charging at him. Dylan froze for a moment before shoving Emily aside and bolting down the street. Fueled by anger, I chased him for 3 blocks before giving up and returning to the lounge parking lot. When I arrived, I found Sophia pinning Emily against a car fender. "Listen to me, you stupid cow," Sophia hissed. "I didn't steal anything from you, you threw it away, and I was smart enough to catch it." As I approached, Sophia stepped back and took a deep breath. "Let's get out of here," she said, brushing her hands off. "I need to check with Frank inside to make sure we didn't cause any damage." I followed her back into the lounge, where we found Frank, the owner, surveying the scene. "No damage here," he assured us with a grin. "But next time, try to stage it during intermission. Give the crowd something to watch while no one's on the mic." Outside, Emily was waiting for me near the entrance, her eyes wide with desperation. "Please, David," she begged as I approached. "Don't go through with the divorce. I'm dying, baby. I need you. I love you, and I know we can work this out." I stared at her, shaking my head in disbelief. "You must be the stupidest person alive, Emily. You're standing here professing your love for me while the guy who caused our divorce is the one picking you up off the floor. And to top it off, you're not even discreet about it." "David, please," she pleaded. "No, Emily," I said firmly. "The only feelings I have for you now are hate and disgust. Leave me alone." With that, I walked around her, got into the car, and drove away. Both divorces were finalized not long after. I proposed to Sophia, but to my surprise, she told me, "Ask me again in a year, baby. Let's see if we're truly right for each other after living together." I respected her decision and waited. A year later, I proposed again, and this time, she said yes. We opted for a simple civil ceremony at the Justice of the Peace. Neither of us wanted the expense or spectacle of another big wedding. As for Emily, she married Dylan, but their marriage fell apart quickly. Dylan had been cheating on her with multiple women, one of whom gave him an STD that he passed on to Emily. While cheating on me had seemed acceptable to her, being cheated on herself was another story. She left Dylan not long after. 6 years into my marriage to Sophia, Dylan and I crossed paths at a family wedding. True to my long-standing promise, I ensured he regretted showing up. Let's just say it might be a while before I receive another family invitation, but it was worth it.